Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. And I'm still in Bogota. Travis, you are actually at home for a change.
Still home. Yeah, a couple more days. The clock is ticking, but a couple more days.
Well, with that out of the way, let's just roll through the intro and get to our first viewer question.
Alrighty. Alex, good news. I think we almost have that jingle completely dialed in. I think that's been my favorite so far. People are getting on board with it. But we're also getting some more viewer mail. So we have a great question. I'm going to cut out, and I appreciate it, I'm going to cut out the part where they said they really, really, really love our podcast and our channels, just to shorten it a little bit. But thank you so much. We read all of it. So here's the question. Without further ado, the reason for the email. I have a lease on a Hyundai Kona EV that's ended in April of 2026 and have a couple questions about that. Before we get too much farther, thank goodness somebody is already thinking ahead on this, because the last thing you want to do is have a lease coming up next month and no plan. Okay, firstly, this is my first lease. What can I expect at the end of the lease? I know there is some sort of lease end fee if I don't lease another Hyundai immediately, but are there other surprises I should be aware of? So let's start there. If your lease is coming up, what should you expect?
Yeah, you should expect the lease end fee. And the only way out of that, it's $250 to $500 for most leases, although that is subject to change based on the leasing company you're talking about. But if you don't lease right, and if you don't lease another vehicle from that same company, then you'll have to pay that fee to just return the vehicle. Now, the weird part about this that doesn't make as much sense as you might hope is that some companies that are conglomerates, the other arms of the company don't qualify. So if you, for instance, return your Hyundai and you lease a Kia, you can't escape that lease end fee. You still have to pay it because you're jumping ship to Kia, even though it's the same thing. Anyway, Genesis, I believe, as of last checking this, is the one you can swap back and forth with Hyundai, but not the third wheel there. So definitely keep that in mind. The other thing is check closely into your lease documents and see what normal wear and tear is. You could probably speak more to this, Travis, because Travis used to work with some dealerships. A lot of manufacturers will actually have cards that specifically have a little circle about this is the size of body damage you can have. This is the size of damage you can have on your rim. There's, of course, going to be a particular depth for the tire, etc., that has to be considered as well.
Yeah, basically, with the lease, you're paying for the use of the vehicle, and the use is going to come with other things. So dents and dings and scratches and those sort of things are basically anticipated, but it's within a reasonable amount. Like Alex said, you cannot shred through your tires unless they are only 36,000 mile tires, which are very much a thing. And that might be considered regular use. But the whole point there is that if you have these extra things, they will start to add up, and they'll go, hey, this is this is extra, this is extra, this is extra. You're not paying it to that dealership, you're paying it to the manufacturer. So just something to consider is that the dealership doesn't want to say, oh, this is all good, and then kind of they get dinged. But you're not there. They don't make any money off of you by doing that. That is not really in their benefit, because they want you to jump into that other vehicle. And if you have a bad experience, you'll probably walk away. So just things to be aware of. There are going to be some fees, especially if you've gone over on mileage. That's a big one. That one adds up quickly. So just check and see where you're at. If you need to start pacing differently, consider doing so, or just be ready to write the check and say, hey, I underestimated how many miles I was going to use, and here's what I have to do for it. But as we talked about in our last podcast, you don't always have to turn in a vehicle. You can actually buy it out and sell it, or you can almost just directly sell it sometimes. That one's a little bit strange, but you can do it. And if you sell the vehicle or buy it out and then sell it, you don't have to pay any of those fees because you didn't return your lease. You purchased the vehicle. So there are definitely some options there to take a look at. But the more interesting component here is the second part of the question, and it says, secondly, this is our second car, and we are a family that needs 2 cars. So I need to figure out what's next. Here are some criteria to hopefully help build a fence around some options. And I'm going to tell you, Alex, there are going to be quite a few options here. We're all in on EVs. I don't think I can ever buy another combustion engine car, barring maybe a small convertible someday. Okay, so check number 1, we're looking at EV. Our other car is a 2022 Ioniq 5 SEL, owned and paid off, and we love it. We're open to swapping this car out too if there's a great 2-car solution that doesn't include this. which does make this a lot more complicated.
Yeah,
We're a family
yeah.
of 4 with 2 tweens. We'd love to have a third row for friends, grandparents, or just more cargo. Every summer, we do a road trip that's just over 1,000 miles, and we make the trip in each direction in a single day. Having at least one car with great charging is a must. Currently, the Ioniq 5 works for that scenario. So that is worth noting. But that is a lot of driving to do in a day, EV regardless, you know.
I will say, let's pause there for just 1 second.
Yeah,
Like on the
please.
road trip side of things, I would say you've immediately really cropped a lot of the slow charging options out there on the market. So if we're talking
Trying to replace the
mile road,
Ioniq 5.
well, it depends on whether they. I'm assuming that by this way they're formatting this question, that they kind of want this vehicle to be the road trippy thing. I guess I should add this one of these other lines before where they're talking about camping, and they want a 3-row to solve the size issue for the camping. So I'm kind of going with that one, but I will say that basically if your EV is going to charge less than 200 kilowatts, just cross that puppy off the list. Continue.
Because that is a very unique use case where it says, hey, we've got to do this. Like, I understand that's a use case, that is the use case, but that is unusual, and that's not a bad thing. This next one, we camp several times a year and need at least one car with decent storage space for those trips. We currently make it work with the Ioniq 5 with a rooftop cargo box, but there's a 3-row would likely solve this more easily for us. Our camping trips are usually within 200 miles of us at state parks where we can often charge if needed. Our kids both participate in traveling sports through the winter that regularly take us in opposite directions up to 50 miles away to rural towns with no charging on the weekends. We live in Wisconsin, so that means anything less than 150 miles of range is a no-go. That's a good thing to be aware of. Speaking of winter, all-wheel drive is preferable, but not strictly necessary. Optionally,
Hallelujah, a logical car shopper.
Correct. Obviously, the Kona is front-wheel drive, and we did just fine this winter. We can always swap in snow tires if necessary. We already do for the Ioniq 5. Budget-wise, we're planning to remodel our house later this year, so minimizing our monthly payments for the first 2 years is a pragmatic choice. Now, there's a couple little bits that we can probably skip just for the reading here, but one of the things that we don't have is an actual budget. It says limit the budget, but it does not give us a budget. So we kind of have to play a little fast and loose with this one and play some guessing games here. But there's a lot to work off of, and Alex, you're right. It does seem like they maybe want that Ioniq 5 to turn into a 3-row and then pick up another something smaller or just kind of for everyday use.
Yeah. Or keep the Ioniq 5 because it's owned and paid off. So that's, honestly, I'd probably keep it. And then add to it with another EV that could do some of these things, which I think is fairly logical. We're finally in a world where I think you can be a 2 EV household relatively easily, to be honest, in America right now, especially some of these longer range EVs. If you live in suburbia, you have the ability to charge at home. And honestly, you're only ever charging on the road trip, which scares some people, but if they've already done it, so they're already in the club. I would immediately, honestly, go to either a Hyundai or a Kia 3-row EV, to be honest, because of the fast charging and the lower sticker price. Those are the two big things. The Hyundai and the Kia are also going to get the tax credit in the U.S. as long as it lives. That is one big question.
We're looking at 2026, so that is a big question, but they're not going to get more expensive because they lost it, right? I mean, it's just going to be they don't get it anymore. So
I will venture a guess, though, and this is a guess, mind you, based on little information. From what I understand, the way that the latest legislation to try and repeal the EV tax credit, and I haven't been able to read through all of it, mind you, because it is a tome, let's say. It is my understanding that the lease loophole is, especially not the people that voted on it, but that's a whole other problem. The lease loophole apparently is going to exist because the corporate tax credits seem to be remaining. And if that is true, I'm sure we will get the sleuths down there in the comment section letting us know. And speaking of which, you can obviously send us emails to hey@autobuyersguide.com, and you can send us voice memos there too. So you can just voice memo on the phone, email that to hey@autobuyersguide.com, and we will answer your questions. Shameless plug there. Yeah, but as long as the lease loophole exists, that could be a convenient way around this, which is handy. And for those that don't know, basically the lease loophole is corporations get a tax credit for green vehicle purchases because the leased vehicle is not titled in your name. It's owned by the leasing company, and you're basically renting it from the leasing company for this period of time. The leasing company gets a tax credit or may get a tax credit based on their tax setup, and they may or may not pass that tax credit on to you. Lots of variables there, but by and large, a decent number of EV leases have effectively that tax credit wrapped into the price.
Yeah, and so obviously that's going to really help your monthly payments. There is a comment about trying to figure out some of the pricing here, and they are currently leasing. Okay, good to know. But it also seems like whatever this next vehicle is doesn't necessarily need to be leased. These are people who are familiar with EVs. They're all in on it. And if you got the right car, and I think I'm right with you. I think the car number one, and let's just say it's a replacement or the new big car is either one of the nines, right? The EV9 or the Ioniq 9. That really would be the main contenders. I'd say, depending on how it works out, you'd definitely be able to buy that. It would work for you for many, many years. Obviously the kids are going to grow up, but they're tweens. So you're looking at least another, assuming they're not the same age exactly, right? 6 to 8 years, something like that, where the kids are going to be around. And that's when you want a little more space. And neither the EV9 or the Ioniq 9 are enormous. So if it became just a regular 2-row vehicle for you, it's not, you're not driving an Escalade IQ, right? So
but importantly, the third row is pretty reasonable. So especially if your kids are still growing and your family's on the taller side of things, you could still squeeze grandparents in the second row, make the kids hop in the third row if you needed to. That should still be possible in an Ioniq 9. Let's go through some of the 3-row things though that come off the top of our head and talk about why they might or might not want to consider them.
Real quick, I was going to tell you, did I tell you that I have a cameo on a TFL video? Can you believe it?
Ooh, the TFLs.
I am the third row test dummy. And I'll tell you what, I fit an Ioniq 9.
Was that Tommy's idea or Roman's?
This was Jen.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And Sophie was on that day, but he went home early. So
on the 3-row options,
lots of them. Lots of 3-rows.
Of course he did. Hey, that's my game. He's not allowed to take my thing. I leave home early. That's my thing. Anyway,
I was talking about 3 rows.
Too much inside baseball here. So 3-row things. Rivian obviously is the first one that comes to mind since the outdoorsy adventure-y thing was mentioned. That's what comes in my mind. But R1S is pretty pricey. So that's the caveat there. If you want long range, R1S is great. The DC charging speeds, though, those are slower than the Ioniq 9, especially at 90% and above. But if you can get 400 something miles, honest to goodness miles, treating it gently out of that R1S, you're not going to be stopping as much. You're talking 2.5, maybe 3 stops, depending on exactly how you go on a 1,000-mile road trip. That's pretty handy.
Right. Guess what? You're stopping anyway because there's a lunch and a dinner if you didn't, if you had breakfast at home for sure.
Hey, not the way I road trip. There's no stopping allowed.
I understand that, but let's pretend that you are going to stop. You're going to stop in 1,000 miles more than once. So just build those into your charging stops, and I think you'd be just fine with R1S, but expensive.
Last time we road tripped to Texas, which is probably why we haven't road tripped since, we stopped for gas every 330 miles. We stopped for the night in El Paso, kicked it on into Houston, because we're going to see a different family, Houston, the next day. So that's like, 1,000-something miles to El Paso, 1,500 miles, kicked it in that last 750 the next day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you.
Eat on the go.
I don't have to. Yeah,
if you can't pee on the go, you got to hold it till you can stop. For gas only.
Correct.
Every 300 miles. That's how it should be.
So about every 4.5 hours or however that comes.
Yeah.
So
it all becomes water control. Don't drink water.
Don't drink anything. The next up on the big range is going to be an Escalade IQ, but we're talking about pricing, and I think that's probably not what we're looking at.
Yeah, right now. I'm going to cross that one off the list.
Enormous range, but
yes,
not the best one. And the
matching price tag
gets you more storage capacity. But okay, so we're moving away from that. What about the Vistic that I drove the same week?
Vistic charges a little too slowly. Mm-hmm. Too slow for my tastes is the problem. I like the Vistic's look.
Range.
Right. I like the look and I like the interior. I think Cadillac's done a good job with those two things. GM has made it very easy to live with some of their vehicles, but the range and the charging speed actually being more important to me than the range, really. I think that's the problem with that one.
Yeah, and they're not particularly inexpensive. I mean, they start
Yeah.
$20,000 lower than they end, but there's a lot of overlap between the nines. I'm just going to call them the nines in this
Yeah.
Vistic, where you can get a top end 9 and then a low end Vistic. And it doesn't mean that it's not still better in some ways, but it's probably not the direction I would go. And then
I
I
would
guess
segue.
Gravity.
Yeah. Gravity is an unknown because we haven't driven it yet, but Gravity is very expensive, so I'm going to cross that one off the list. Although efficiency, range, charging, very, very, very good in the Gravity, but you got to pay to play. Similarly, pay to play is the Model X, although Tesla is not the leader in this segment anymore, I would argue. By the way, if everybody can hear honking in the distance, there's like the two largest intersections in Bogota are happening right over there. Don't know what's going on down there, but something's happening down there.
Some
Anyway,
blackout curtains to tune out.
but what's also fun is that they've been repaving that road, and so every night that we've been here, it's jackhammering all night long. And they're also redoing floor number 5, 2 floors below us, because we're on the 8th floor. And they've been jackhammering all day long down there. So it's basically constant jackhammer here, which is
panes are the windows.
Single pane windows, no seals, because you know what? It is always the same temperature. So there's no heating, no air conditioning, because it's actually, the weather is actually my exact preference. This is like, I could retire, not downtown Bogota, unless I had some sort of ginormous penthouse, but I could retire to the Andes. Totally, I would do this in a heartbeat. The weather-wise, other problem. Anyway, totally off things here. Model X. I think it's been a while since Tesla has been in the lead in this particular segment. Model X is not as practically shaped as the bigger, boxier options in the segment. The range is decent, the performance is good, and of course it has the promise of Tesla's network and Tesla's software. But range is better in some of the other alternatives. Efficiency is better in some of the alternatives, and charging is definitely better in some of the alternatives because the Model X doesn't charge quite as quickly as some of the other Teslas. We're going to get a refresh soon. The bigger thing that actually kicks it out for me, though, is its price tag. Remember that Model X starts as a 2-row. That third row bumps it out of the tax credit price-wise, and they do get kind of expensive.
And I can fit in the third row of a Model X, surprisingly, but it's one of those vehicles that the experience really drops off as you go farther back in the rows, right? The front is awesome. You got the enormous windshield, as long as it's not crazy hot where you're at, and it drives really nicely, but then you have to deal with Falcon Wing doors, and then you have to crawl your way into the third row. And so Model X probably out. And the one that I hate to say is probably out, I think we both kind of agree to this, is the ID Buzz, because it don't got the range nor the charging.
Yeah. The ID Buzz is a tricky one. I think I will segue to XC40 before we buzz because we're going down in price, sort of. EX90, Volvo's alphabet soup. Anyway, EX90, better value than I had expected, to be honest. I think it's a better value than Vistic, but it doesn't charge as quickly as I would like. And 300 miles range is okay. 190, 200 kilowatts is okay, but that range combined with the charging, combined with the price tag, I think is a problem.
Yeah, if you really like the premium offering there, like go for it, but just know that it's going to fall a little bit short on some of your distance driving, which so far the 9s cover pretty well. And as I said, the Buzz just won't cover it. It's not going to happen.
Buzz is the tricky one because it is really roomy. If you want something truly huge inside, it might be worth thinking about, but know that even though it does charge rapidly from 0 to 100%, it actually is shockingly good. The charge rate is shockingly good, over 90%, all the way to 100%. It's really, really quick. You're going to need to do that all the time. You're going to need to drive it all the way to the end and fill it all the way back up every single time. Well, that's going to be a bummer.
If you're going to keep your Ioniq 5, then you could look at a Buzz. If you say the 5 works for this trip, for this scenario, with the roof box, it does whatever we need, cool. I know the roof box is more for camping, but you probably wouldn't need it with the Buzz, or you get a really cute one that color matches your Buzz, and people will love it. Go for it.
Yep.
If you're keeping the Ioniq 5, you could do a Buzz. But if you're trying to make this the main vehicle and this is what you drive more often than not, then I would probably avoid it.
And I will polish this off by saying, since you're looking at April 2026, and it is possible that there are going to be some early lease return EV9s coming out around that time, if you plan ahead, a used EV9, as long as you're looking at the big battery, I think would actually be fine, because the range is going to be good. On those, I probably would lean more towards all-wheel drive, just the size of the vehicle. Even though you are familiar with two-wheel drive and winter tires, it is a decent amount bigger and heavier, so the likelihood of getting a little, sticky and a little sideways is probably a little bit larger. But I think the fast charging and the range are a good combo there, and probably a decent deal on a lease return model if you could find one. Availability would be the tricky part.
Yeah, you do want to be on the lookout, and you might need to move a little bit sooner. You get into it before your lease is done, or however you want to manage that or needed to. I want to throw a little curveball in here, though. If I was, because I love to play this game and it creates a lot of problems in my life, is how to do this the best way possible. And my head just goes, this is better than this, and this is better than this. It doesn't mean the most practical. It doesn't mean the most fiscally responsible. I go, what's the best way to do this? And I'll tell you what, a car that has sunk its way into my heart, and you can get a really good used deal on it. If you're looking to replace your Kona, maybe you keep the Ioniq 5, maybe you get rid of it and you do something like one of these 9s, the EV9 or the Ioniq 9. My best friend yesterday said, what do I get for my next car? He's got a Bolt. I said, you know what you should really look at? You should look at a C40 Recharge. I said, those are just so much fun to drive. And he doesn't need the boxiness. They've got another vehicle that's the utility vehicle. So if you got a kid and you go into sports, you can throw whatever you need in the back of a C40. You don't need the max cargo volume, because that's what your other car's for. But they are way less expensive, or relatively speaking, than the XC40 Recharge, because less people are interested in them. But I'm more interested in them, and they're less expensive. That could be a fun way to go. If you're saying, hey, we're just going to mix up the field, we're going to do something different every which direction. Something to think about. All-wheel drive, obviously.
I do kind of like the C40. Depending on the C40 you're looking at, of course, because there were some two-wheel drive ones, and I mean you can get a two-wheel drive one now. But depending on the year, the beginning ones were all-wheel drive. I will say that the back seat might be a little tight depending on your size, but the C40 is definitely very fun. The software, little tricky. Keep in mind that if you want adaptive cruise control, that, like most of the Volvo line currently, actually is an option. So be sure you search, for the model that you want when you're doing it.
Test drive it and make sure it has it. Just because the button is there regardless.
And interestingly, all the hardware is there, because on our C40, we got the Orbit software, which is out there. You guys can Google it. And we, turned on the adaptive cruise control, and it works flawlessly. Once we figured out what we did wrong with the firewall on the computer, there was a computer firewall problem. At any rate, Travis was there for that. It was fun. We thought we killed the car.
Was there? You know why Travis was there? Because Travis had just brought the vehicle back. So we added the adaptive cruise control after he drove from Washington to California.
Of course.
Yep.
You youngsters, you need to experience life without all these things. I mean, you expect adaptive cruise control. I mean,
too much.
Do you want your food chewed for you in advance?
I mean, I love a good smoothie. But in defense of these young people, I guess I'm in that category. Depends on who you ask. I can still drive a car with 3 pedals just as much as I can drive with 1. So, we make it work.
That leads me on to one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, which was some comments on the Lexus ES video that did make me really want to comment on this, which is to the viewers that when you're shopping or looking at cars on the American market. This is going to be more of a mind blower for Americans in the decades going forward. America, and of course, for all the international viewers that are offended by us calling the U.S. America, check out the Oxford English Dictionary. It's allowed. The Brits even say that that's okay. Anyway,
It's
the
allowed.
U.S. The U.S. market, it is a norm. America generally refers to the U.S. unless we're talking about the Americas or North America, South America. So anyway, whatever. So the United States market has long been the largest global automotive market that there is. However, that is not the case anymore, and it does not appear that it's likely to be the case ever again. And this is causing some American car shoppers' minds to get blown and start saying, well, why is this car ugly? Why does this car have the engine choices that I don't like, etc.? And case in point was that Lexus ES that you and Nick went to go see recently. A lot of comments were like, oh, this is going to ruin their business in North America. Their sales are shrinking in North America. The ES is down to just 20% of Lexus's volume. To that I say, it should be shocking that it's still 20% because it's a sedan, and sedans just don't sell. So Lexus is already selling way more sedans still in the US than a logical person should conclude they should sell. But also, it wasn't designed for us. It was designed not for old people in the US. It was designed for young people in China, because this shocked us both. It is the single best-selling imported car in China.
Yeah. I'll admit, right, I'm not as in tune with the global market as I'd like to be at this point, but that's the one. That's the and the answer is yes, that's the one. And some of the options that we get, so here in the US, it comes in basically three layouts: one a front-wheel drive hybrid, one a front-wheel drive electric, and then an all-wheel drive dual motor electric. The only way you can get the luxury seating, so the executive seat, the rear seating package, is if you get it with the hybrid. And the reason that it's set up that way is probably because the person who gets the executive rear seats is likely being driven around, or it's them and their friends, and they're not worried about performance. They're worried about a nice, smooth, comfortable ride. And it makes sense also that you're going to find that in the hybrid and not the EV, because that also feels like an experience that is not meant to be interrupted with charging ever. I don't want to be in the back of my my Lexus ES and have my driver have to stop. So that's why you go hybrid instead of EV in that one, I guess.
Yeah, admittedly, I don't know what the Chinese market model option structure is on that one. But when you look at the ES stylistically on the outside and on the inside, it does make a lot of sense when you realize that it sells better in China.
Yeah.
Also, when you look at some of the options that it was designed to have, like the crazy weird 2-screen setup in the dash, which we're not going to get in the United States, etc. Those also make sense in that context. And this is also why we find things like a Volvo van in China that has a huge throne in the back. Instead of extra rows of seats, it's just got ginormous, big, fluffy, comfy seats in the back, because they're much more likely to be chauffeur-driven in China than in North America. There are some synergies. They like larger vehicles in China, like the Americans, and they like softer suspensions, like the Americans versus the Europeans, which is why there have been these Chinese models that are co-developed here. Volkswagen has developed models jointly for the US and China for some time. Volvo's stretched S90 was developed for China, and then they were like, hey, that should work in America. But this is something that we are seeing more and more, and it's also going to affect some of the European brands, I think, going forward, because right now we're seeing that with Volvo. Volvo's largest market is not the United States and hasn't been for some time. If it ever was, someone will have to correct me on that one, I'm sure. But the U.S. is Volvo's third largest market, so they're definitely going to be designing vehicles for those primary markets first. What they think works for us, we're going to get, etc. And the moment these switches start flipping for BMW and Audi, we're going to see changes here as well, with Mercedes as well, which is why we see, for instance, the plug-in hybrid AMGs. They need those in those markets for emissions compliance, for the ZEV credits that they don't call them that there, but carbon credits, offsets, et cetera, for plug-in hybrids and EVs. It just is not financially feasible to make a V8 AMG for us and a 4-cylinder AMG for them.
I will say that if this Lexus ES is not built for us, we just get it, right? If that's just kind of an overarching understood, or it's a lot closer to that than it has been before. It has a very different interior layout than a lot of the Lexus currently in the dealership. And it feels so much more what I would think a next gen or futuristic or modern Lexus would look like than what we end up getting. So if we're getting kind of like this leftover-ish design, I actually think I like it better than a lot of the black, a lot of the big screen, a lot of the direction that it's headed recently.
But I think that's actually one of the benefits of America's shrinking importance in the international market, is instead of the product being focus grouped to death for Americans, where the 99% of GM and Ford's volume in the United States is that, for instance. Like if we're looking at Jeep, Dodge, Ram, Chrysler, Ford, all the GM things, everything that Toyota and Honda sells in the United States largely has been created for us or significantly redesigned for us. Honda especially, for instance. I think actually that kind of results in some things that are a little bit bland. And it is more interesting to me personally when we do get these products that were designed for another market, but the manufacturer's like, maybe that'll work there. And they give it a try because at least it has more personality. I have never seen one of them sell extraordinarily well. ES, I think, works well for both markets, so this is not that case. I think it will sell just fine for ES's historic sales trajectory in the US. I don't think that's a problem. But Lexus is not bringing their tiny little utility vehicles from other world markets to the US. I don't think that would be a good fit. We never had some of Audi's smallest vehicles. For instance, we've never really had some of the Mercedes A and B class vehicles in the United States. We had some one-off electric things here and there, but never really had them here. Never had an Audi A1. Fills me with sadness.
Yeah. I haven't had as many A3 options as I wanted to over the years, But I don't know. It's heading in an interesting direction, and I think even if it doesn't land, it brings in a little bit of diversity. And it's one of those things where if every car is built with, let's just say, a sportier, more aggressive, more masculine vibe to it, and that's where you get all these big screens and sharp edges and lots of black on black on black, and then we get something different. Even if that one doesn't hit the mark, it might expand some of these horizons. Someone goes, oh, that was interesting. I didn't buy it, but I liked it. And then what's the next closest thing to that? And that's the direction they go. So yeah, I don't know. I like the ES. I liked it. It's got a bit of a long hood, but I liked it.
Yeah. I would say after seeing TX, GX, RX, ES exceeded my expectations. I assumed it would be kind of derivative and a little bit blander than it is. I actually am intrigued by the direction of the ES. Part of me, however, is a little surprised maybe that Lexus didn't try and push the envelope on front storage or anything like that, because it is a gasoline platform that has been bevified, batteryified, whatever we want to call it, right? I know they want to say electrified, but I refuse to say electrified. So I kind of wish that they had done a little bit more.
Timestamp on this, I'll call it the electrified section, but carry on.
Yeah, I will. I wish they'd done a little bit more to not necessarily compete with Tesla, because honestly, they don't have to in those markets, but to just make it more modern in that respect. And that does lead me to my other news story, which is BYD has officially passed Tesla in Europe sales-wise. And obviously, they've passed Tesla in other markets as well. What does that mean for the future of Tesla, do you think? Do you think they can pull the nose up here?
Well, it's a multi-pronged, question here, because I think that was inevitable unless the
Hmm.
Cybertruck was not a Cybertruck, unless the next model Tesla was a different volume model, because
Mm.
BYD is just on a tear. So it
Hmm.
almost has
Hmm.
nothing to do with Tesla. It has to do with the insane growth, the money being thrown at BYD, the amount of vehicle, the
Mm.
variety of options that they have available. So sort of an inevitability, unless
Mm.
unless there was a bigger or a smaller, however you want to put it, unless there was another volume Tesla out there. But it's not good news, and
Yeah.
we mentioned it earlier. It's not, or I think last episode, it's not great news for Tesla in Europe anyway right now,
You
or
saying if
anywhere.
Tesla had a Model 2, that it could have been better.
Possibly, right?
Maybe
One that was less
maybe a
expensive, and
maybe a Roadster to help drive sales.
a Roadster would probably bring people in to take a look at it, and that's, Halo
Hmm.
cars
Hmm.
are a thing for a reason. If what I think went wrong. Here's what I think went wrong, and I go back all the way till, oh gosh, 2018 on this one, maybe 2017. That the Model 3 should have been a hatchback, and especially in Europe,
Mm.
that would have gone over a lot better.
Mm. They really wanted the range, I think, with the Model 3, and they had such good success with Model S. I think that that's kind of where the hubris was going.
I hear
Also,
you. I don't
plenty of
care.
hubris because remember who's in charge, right? So that's why that went
Y-
that way.
Yeah, Model 3 hatchback. That's what it needs.
I will say that I disagree that this was inevitable because the BYD being a big deal, that's inevitable. BYD passing Tesla in Europe, where Chinese made vehicles are still looked down a little upon. And the problem for Tesla is that that is changing rapidly. But
Yeah.
at the moment, in many markets, Chinese EVs are still a little looked down on. It's like, oh, well, I don't know if I would buy that. But a European or American EV doesn't have that same connotation in many of these markets. And Tesla certainly had the brand equity. I think that there was too much distraction and too much focus on other stupid stuff, flamethrowers, tequilas, stupid robots, blah, 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 blah.
Surfboards. Yeah.
Honestly, even the full self-driving, waste of time. You notice that BYD is not going anywhere based on full self-driving promises or robo-taxis, because most customers don't buy those options. Most customers are just buying a car. So maybe more money should have been spent on making the car cheaper, making more of the cars, making different flavors of the car that could have expanded sales. I kind of would have liked to have seen a smaller, boxier three row from Tesla. I think that would have been a good hit for them. I think also performance models. Yes, they have performance models, but where is what has been rumored many times? Where is the BMW M3 variant like Model 3? That's what I think would be hugely profitable for Tesla. I know we've had this conversation before, but like body kit, tires, brakes, etc., because it has the go, but it doesn't have the cornering capability improvement over the others that you would see in an M or an AMG, and that would be
Right.
such a cheap thing for Tesla to do, but hugely profitable. You know, big
The
tires, big fender flares, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, the thing is that the recent update for the Performance Model 3 is a big one. I mean, at that point, it did get different
A lot better.
suspension and
Mm-hmm.
tires and seats, and so that was way closer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think where you're heading is, why not look at that and split it? So say,
Mm-hmm.
half get slower, half get faster, and it's still got
Yep.
the kit and the look and 80% of the performance. But this other one
Mm-hmm.
gets an extra 20%, and it gets the,
Yep.
the super brakes, and yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't hurt, and it would put the car in a position where, even if more people didn't buy that model, it drew people in because it's closer and
Mm-hmm.
they want the one that's similar to that. I will say though, that Performance Model 3, and I haven't looked recently, I want to say it was around $55,000, something like that. Screaming deal for
Yeah, pretty
what
good
used
deal.
to be cheap speed, used to be like a Subaru WRX,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously this is a step above it as far as pricing, but it's also a
Mm-hmm.
big step above it when it comes to what you can enjoy on the road and day to
Mm-hmm.
day. So yeah.
But think what they could do if it was priced like an M3, because it can blow
Right.
the doors off an M3 in a straight line, can't handle as well as an M3. But imagine what they could have done if that had been the target
Yeah.
right? So if it was $90,000 for a Model 3 Performance, all of those things could be in there. Adaptive suspension, big carbon ceramic brakes, really ultra grippy tires, etc. But the thing and the reason behind that is that these performance models for manufacturers are hugely profitable, and Tesla's margins have long been praised, but they're really not extraordinary when you look at the whole picture. And I think a lot of people don't do that. Tesla's 24 to 30% margin, never hit 30 as I can recall, but they're always in this like over 20% margin bump area. That gross margin is fantastic unless you consider Stellantis odd years where they're over 25, or some of the other manufacturers too. But those manufacturers are selling through dealers that take their own 10 or 15%. So when you look at that dealer margin plus the manufacturer margin, practically everybody out there actually has a better than Tesla margin. So the margin improvements, I think, are also something they could have worked harder on, which could have helped them fund Model 2, helped them fund Roadster, etc. We don't know when or if those will ever actually exist, but I'm guessing it's simply because of a cash problem.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say, so the Model 3 Performance they have right now is very much like an S3, and it needs an RS3. That's the differentiator. Where's that next step? Yeah, I don't know.
Right, it's an M Sport. It's an M Sport handling package with the thrust beyond an M3. That's the thing. So it's like the go is so fantastic. But then the handling is still good. Don't get Tesla fans, don't crucify us. Not saying the handling's bad. It's just not, if they've dialed the performance up to 11, the 0 to 60 times up to 11, but they did not dial the handling up to 11 or the braking or the other things. And we see more of a holistic approach in some of the other performance cars that are admittedly significantly more expensive. I'm just saying there's money in them, our hills, because if you can get that customer that's willing to pay $90,000.
Right. It's the EV6 GT versus the Ioniq 5N. And Tesla does not have an N. They have a GT.
They don't have, and they could. Like, they could do this. And they don't have a Taycan, but they could, right?
Good.
And guess how much those cars are the premiums over the mainstream model is definitely higher than we see in Model 3 Performance. So
yeah.
Any guesses on what we're going to see with Model S and X refresh? Do you think we're going to get 800 volt EVs?
When do you think this refresh is? That's my first. Let's help me answer that question. When do you think they're going to get a refresh?
I mean, we've been seeing supposedly prototypes out in the wild. So I would guess it's got to be under a year away. It's my guess.
The biggest conversation I keep
When's the next Tesla day?
Oh, I don't know. The biggest conversation it's traumatic, right? The biggest conversation I hear is about the cheaper, more mainstream Model Y, $35,000 or $30,000, whatever. That and really that's the one that needs to come out. Again, it needs to be in volume. It needs to start swinging some people back the other direction. And S and X are not it. They're not going to do it. Who's going to trade it in? Current S and X owners. Is Tesla in a position right now where the product they put out as a mild refresh is better than any of these brand new EVs hitting the market?
I think
maybe
preventing attrition. But preventing those customers from walking away, I think, is where they need to go. Because Tesla in that premium group, I could definitely see a Model X shopper. Good friend of mine has had 2 or 3 Model X's. I don't know. My memory's bad here on exactly how many she's had. I think she might be on her 3rd now. But at any rate, I could definitely see her going for a Lucid Gravity instead of a Model X because she's had a lot of problems with the Falcon wing doors and some other things, right? So I could see her walking, but at the same time, it's the comfy spot. And, it's other than that, it's been okay for her. She's bought 3 of them, right? So
it's a big reason people keep buying cars.
Right. If it was enough changed, enough improved, enough promises of improved functionality or whatever, you could keep that customer from walking. But if it's not enough, I could see that Model S customer going for a BMW i5 or trying an EQE. Like, what? No harm, no foul, right? I mean,
we got the interior refresh a year, 2 years ago, something like that. And that was a nice bump up. It did
Yeah.
bring it much closer to where things are now. But I guess that's the next question: is what is the big increase? Because the body didn't change substantially on either of them. They're getting new noses, like we're seeing on the 3 and the Y. But what do you do? I mean, on the Model X, you get rid of the falcon wing doors. I don't think that's a selling point anymore. I think that's the gimmick is over. But I can also see them doubling down, and they're all falcon wing doors, front and second row. That at this point, who knows? Maybe there's a third row of falcon wing doors. Maybe the first row stays normal, but now we get 2 rows of falcon wing doors. Yeah,
maybe they'll give us a squircle instead of the yoke, or maybe the yoke is now a top bottom yoke, so you got to drive like this.
Alex, why are we talking about steering wheels? They all drive themselves.
Sure they do. It is interesting down here in Colombia. You see a lot of BYDs, and you don't see any Teslas really. I think I saw 2 our entire time here so far. We'll have a running tally maybe later. But I am back on the topic of markets and domination and changes. I am intrigued to see, islanding of markets is not necessarily bad. It can stifle innovation. And arguably, a lot of analysts point to America's truck segment as being a perfect example of this, as a segment that does not have innovation in it, because you cannot bring a truck into North America, into the United States, unless it was manufactured in North America without some big tariffs, big or small, etc. And even with cargo vans, you see that it's only been relatively recent that we've had just a smidgen of innovation in the cargo van segment. A smidgen, really. And most of that was driven not by an external entity coming in, because Mercedes did come into the market. They don't sell that many cargo vans, not a big influx, right? It's actually been Ford bringing in their European van, and Stellantis bringing in a Fiat and manufacturing it in North America for the North American market. But we don't get Volkswagen vans. We don't get these other van manufacturers. And pickup trucks, very much the same thing. We don't get these cool trucks from here and there and wherever, because of the tariff situation. So I think one valid concern is that the tariff on Chinese vehicles will also leave Americans out of innovation, because yes, it's not great that BYD is accused of using effectively slave labor. I'm not going to gloss over that, right? So whether we're talking about BYD's factory in Brazil, where apparently bad conditions happen in that factory that they're building in Brazil, or we're talking about manufacturing in China, that is a major problem, right, to be discussed. But we're talking product, and the product is definitely innovative from not just BYD, but all of the mainline Chinese EV manufacturers and hybrid manufacturers as well, because they have some really quirky and interesting hybrid and plug-in hybrid technology there that we don't get. And if that technology never comes to North America, what is the incentive for a North American or a Japanese or a European company to try and compete with it?
And especially
in our market
Tesla right now is not just losing out in Europe, but they're also massively losing out in China, right? You think Chinese-made vehicles are a problem globally?
Yeah,
try China, right? I mean, that is that much more difficult. Just like we protect our trucks, there's tariffs, right?
I mean,
so that's a tough market they're not going to get back. They can keep where they're at, maybe, but they're not clawing away at a lot of conquests.
And China's doing now what Tesla was doing 15 years ago, where it was like, oh my God, I didn't think an EV could charge that fast. And then you turn around and like 6 months later, Tesla bumped the charging rate up again, and they kept going up and up and up and up until they hit 255. And then it was like, yeah, that's really the end. Apparently they're other than Cybertruck, but like turns out that really is the end of their design, their pack, etc. But other manufacturers, they can definitely go beyond there. Apparently I have a timer set on my watch, but other manufacturers, they've been going beyond. And in China, they're preparing for true megawatt charging. They have a standard out. There are vehicles that are approaching that in production now. We're talking bonkers charge rates that Tesla has been a little left behind in, shall we say.
And I'll be honest, I don't think those charge rates are wholly necessary. I really don't.
No.
It's a fringe use case, but it's one of those things. We live in a world where if it can, then that's better, even if it's wholly unnecessary and you'll never use it.
The customer wants it. Does anybody need 475, 500 miles of range in their pickup truck? No, but GM has proved that the customer is interested in this thing.
I know. Now, here's a question I have for you about what does the customer want. One of the comments in our Vistic video, as I mentioned, we read through our comments, said they were a little bit down on General Motors, and they went, why not just say you don't want to build this kind of vehicle because killing the XT6, replacing it with the Vistic, nobody's going to buy this. It's a one and done model. What a stupid decision. And I went, you know what? I'm just curious, right? Because we hear a lot of this when it comes to electrification, whether that be hybrid, whether it be plug-in hybrid or EVs. So I want to run through some numbers here, and you tell me how it sounds. And I got these on, and if I'm missing a beat on here, please jump in. So, for example, I pulled up models that are known to have a hybrid model and an internal combustion one. Not like one of 8 trims is a hybrid. There's pretty good parity amongst, right? We're just trying to get a good context here. So I started off with the RAV4, which in 2024 sold about 475,000 units in the US. That is a lot of RAV4s. 208,000 of those, so nearly 50% as it was a hybrid.
Yeah,
that is nearly 50%. And to get it much closer to 50%, still a little bit short, but by a hair, is that 31,000, again, all round numbers, were plug-in hybrids. So now we're looking at the RAV4. It is fully electrified. It is hybrid or plug-in hybrid. There is no prime anymore. There's a lot more variety of plug-in hybrid options and availability. I don't think that's going to hurt the RAV4. We know that pricing is going to change. We know it's going to get a little bit more expensive, but we also know that the base price is not the one that hardly anybody ends up paying or purchasing in the first place. And when we did the math, I think it was at least on the Camry, because we do a lot of this. I think it was on the Camry. The new hybrid pricing is actually less expensive than the old hybrid started out as. But again, some of the packaging is a little bit different. So it's not all of a sudden everything's more expensive. Okay, so let's move away from the RAV4. We've got the Corolla Cross, 93,000, which is a lot less, obviously, but 35,000 of those were hybrid. And that's like a third, right? Or a little over a third. Corolla, very similar. I mean, it's less, but 233,000 Corollas, 50,000 hybrids. And at that point with the Corolla, we're looking, I think, a lot at cost. Plays a big thing into it.
I would agree. Yeah.
You have a couple extra bucks, those percentages start to increase. And then just for fun, because my whole argument here, if you haven't caught on, is that this like march to electrification isn't going to kill the car or kill a specific model. The Prius sold 45,000 units last year, which is a lot less than I would like. The new Prius is great to look at. 12,500 of those were plug-in hybrids. So it's the more electric Prius, the more electrified Prius. And we're still, it's about a quarter of the sales. Okay, so those are all Toyotas. I know that, but Toyota does a great job of splitting those things up, and it's nice to look at. Here was the big one.
I will say though, sideways from that though, Volvo's electric sales split and plug-in hybrid split is really, really good too. In California, for instance, I believe it's over 60% plug-in hybrid on the models that it's offered in, which is most of the lineup. And worldwide, Volvo has proved that in the luxury segment, especially, having the hybrid be the performance option with extra fuel economy is very attractive.
Yes, it's sort of a win-win situation. Plus, with a luxury vehicle purchase, chances are that much higher. Somebody owns their home and can plug in when they get there and that sort of thing. So the main one here, because it was about the Vistic, right? The Vistic replaces the XT6. So I said, what's the closest comparison I can draw? And it was the XT5 versus the Lyriq, because those fall into roughly the same categories. There's the bigger 2-row sort of layout. The XT5 sold 26,500 units in 2024, and the Lyriq 28,500. So I think this is basically the same sort of split that we see with RAV4. And I'm looking at these numbers when you go, what's the non-electrified and what's the electrified? Well, RAV4, Toyota said, we're basically at a 50% split. We're comfortable saying they're all now electrified. Now, obviously, hybrid is very different than full electric, but I'm not as worried about that Vistic not picking up sales from the XT6 as I think some people are.
I don't think it's that much of a problem because especially the enthusiast that likes to complain, they're not generally the people that actually buy the cars, as is proved by the sales numbers. The Cadillac transition to electrification, we'll know real soon, because by the end of this year, all the SUVs except for the Escalade will be electric. I think Lyriq is a good example, though, because it was the first. They had still had some production volume issues in 2020, early 2024, as I recall. But they also didn't have the Lyriq V, so the lineup wasn't complete. Now they have a performance one to try and theoretically sell even more. And I bet that once XT5 is finally dead, which it's going to end production here, if it hasn't already ended, it'll be by the end of this year, there will be a non-zero number of those XT5 shoppers that end up buying a Lyriq, whether that's begrudgingly or not, or maybe they're just enticed because they're like, oh, I like Cadillac. This is the Cadillac I can afford. I guess I'll give it a whirl. We'll see how that turns out after that transition. But I suspect that number for Lyriq will either remain relatively consistent this year, or it will actually increase for all of calendar year 2025.
Yeah, especially if they are Cadillac shoppers and they've got the XT5 and their lease is coming up, and they go, oh, the current one on the market doesn't seem that much different than mine. It's not radically improved, and there's not going to be another one. They go, oh, well, do I want a vehicle that's going out of sale? Not everyone's going to be on board with that. So yeah, it was just an interesting thought, because obviously I picked a brand.
No, it is interesting, yeah.
They're hybrids, but that's kind of the point, right? We want to make sure that there's a good offering, not they have one. And I looked at a bunch of the other models. Honestly, just about everything Toyota sells with a hybrid makes up at least roundabout at least a quarter of their sales, and that's a big chunk. That's a big chunk.
Yeah. It's I think we should end with this thought. Let me know what you think about this one, but we're running up against our time limit here. Definitely in vein with this whole car manufacturers make things their customers are interested in, falls in two vehicles that were launched in relatively short order here, or announced in relatively short order here, that the comment section just made me scratch my head a little bit, which was the Jeep Compass. Lots of people obviously going, oh, how long till it catches on fire? How long till it does this? How long till it does that? Well, Jeep Cherokee, I should say. Compass also is coming soon, but Cherokee has been announced, and it will be in production on sale by the end of this year, end of 2025. And oddly enough, as a 2025 model year vehicle, not a 2026. Go figure. Yeah. At any rate,
that was wagging your ass, didn't they?
Yeah, they did that with a bunch of things. That's a Stellantis thing. Go figure. Whatever. But at any rate, so Cherokee, it will have a hybrid. They have confirmed that. There will be a non-hybrid. There will be a hybrid. Probably some sort of plug-in hybrid would be my guess at some eventual point, but details there sketchy. At any rate, comment section full of negative things on it. But Cherokee sold really quite well in its previous generation. Also definitely profitable for the company. They're selling what customers want. People want these vehicles. And there is a choice that customers have to make. And I'll tie this back to Toyota in just a second, I promise. But customers often have to make this choice of style, performance, off-road capability, towing capability, etc., reliability. All these things are swimming around in their personal choice bucket, right? And it's which ones are you pulling out? Which ones are you interested in? And with Cherokee, for instance, historically, again, don't know all the details in this new one, but historically, part of the reason that it was less reliable than the competition is that it was the only compact unibody thing out there that had a 2-speed transfer case, had a real locking rear differential, etc. It was significantly more off-road capable than anything else in that segment. Really, if you wanted to be more capable than a Cherokee, you had to get a Grand Cherokee because it had an adaptive air suspension for increased height, or you had to get a Wrangler or a Bronco or something like that. There were no corollaries like it because of the quirky drivetrain design and this unique desire to have a true 2-speed transfer case and all of that. But all of that adds huge mechanical complexity, because in the Cherokee, it actually had two 2-speed transfer cases, one in the front, one in the back. And it had a real locker in the rear, but that also produces a lot of stress. So if you're the kind of person that engages the locker when you're not supposed to, engages 4 low when you're not supposed to, stuff's going to break because it's not made for that on pavement. Segue, never engage 4-low in a part-time four-wheel drive system or rear locker if you're on regular pavement unless you are experiencing wheel slip. Just don't do it. But then on the Toyota side, you get the people that are like, oh, it's boring, it's not competitive, it's not this, it's not that. Why didn't Toyota push the envelope? Why didn't Toyota do this? Why didn't Toyota do that? Because Toyota sells cars to people that like Toyotas. And if they did that, the customers that like Toyotas wouldn't like it anymore. So it's like every car company out there knows their game by and large. There are a few car companies that seem to have lost the plot, but Jeep hasn't lost it yet. Their sales and profits are still pretty good. Sales down, profits up. A lot of the missing sales are missing models in the lineup. Toyota, same thing. Toyota sales dramatically up. Obviously, they know what their customer is interested in, and if you don't like it, don't buy one.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, I don't think it's the end of General Motors. I don't think it's the end of Cadillac. I do, and I think we've talked about this before. I do think Cadillac is pretty bold in their, hey, we're going to be basically the first to a fully electrified lineup. They got pretty much everything there except for an electric sedan.
Close.
But again, the sedan market, they might not do it. They might just say goodbye sedans.
Yeah.
You know, or they'll keep the CT5 Blackwing and say, here you go, here's the performance car, you can have that one. Everything else,
CT5, they did say, how did they phrase this? CT5 has no future replacement, I think is how they phrased that. Like there's zero development on a next generation rear wheel drive platform that's gas unibody for GM. It does not appear.
Not surprised.
CT6 and others, and the bigger sedan still exists in China with the plug-in hybrid, as I recall. They might have canceled it already though, but part of me would not be surprised if they replaced CT5 with some sort of hatchy wagony kind of EV thing, somewhat small Celestic maybe, or if they decided that China needed a next generation plug-in hybrid luxury sedan, and we got that in the US. But I don't think it's going to continue. Yeah. I don't think it's going to continue in its current state. Like there's not going to be a CT5 rear-wheel drive Blackwing thing in our future. For at least a year, 2, 3 years, maybe even, yes. But 5 years out, I doubt that it will still be here.
Yeah, definitely not the long term, unfortunately.
Yeah. Gasoline Escalade, though, that gasoline Escalade, that's going to keep printing cash as long as they can do it, though.
Oh yeah, that'll turn into the Ram Classic. That's what it'll be.
Yeah. At any rate, hit that subscribe button down there. Send us all your voice memos, emails to hey@autobuyersguide.com, etc. And thanks, Dan, for your viewer question. See all of you next week.
Thank you.